There's a quiet misunderstanding that destroys more traders than bad strategies ever could. And that misunderstanding is this: you think you're taking action, but most of the time, you are only reacting. Reaction feels powerful because it is fast, because it gives your nervous system the illusion of control, because in that moment, your heart rate increases and your mind tells you, at least I did something. But the market does not reward movement, it rewards clarity. And clarity never lives inside a reaction. Action comes from a place of choice, reaction comes from a place of pressure. And the painful truth most traders avoid is that pressure does not come from the market, it comes from inside you. When price moves quickly, you don't actually respond to the candle, you respond to the meaning you attach to it. The fear of missing out, the fear of being wrong again, the memory of the last loss that still hasn't healed. And so your hand clicks, not because your plan told it to, but because your emotion demanded relief. This is where traders lie to themselves. They call it decisiveness. They call it confidence. They call it trusting their instinct. But if you slow the moment down, if you are brutally honest, you will see it clearly. There was no decision, only a reflex. Action requires space. Reaction erases space. Action is quiet. Reaction is loud. Action waits until the mind is stable. Reaction happens when the mind is overwhelmed. And here is the part that hurts the ego the most. The market does not care how intense your reaction felt. It only reflects whether your action was aligned. Most losing trades are not wrong because the analysis was bad. They are wrong because the trader entered while emotionally leaning forward, while internally chasing certainty, while trying to escape discomfort. The moment you feel urgency, you are no longer acting, you are reacting. And until you learn to see that moment honestly, speed feels intelligent to the trader who is afraid of stillness. And this is why reaction disguises itself so well as skill. When price accelerates, the mind tells a seductive story. If you don't move now, you'll be left behind. If you hesitate, you'll miss the move. If you wait, you're weak. And so speed becomes a badge of competence, a way to prove to yourself that you are sharp, alert, connected to the market's pulse. But what you are really responding to is not information, it is stimulation. The nervous system confuses intensity with insight and emotion with intuition. Reaction feels like clarity because it silences doubt for a moment. It collapses uncertainty into motion, and that relief is addictive. The problem is that the relief never lasts. Every reactive trade teaches your brain the same lesson. Discomfort can be escaped by clicking, and over time your threshold for discomfort shrinks. You start reacting earlier, faster, with less information, and you call it experience. This is where traders mistake familiarity for mastery. You've seen this setup before, you've felt this volatility before, your body recognizes the pattern and moves before the mind has finished asking the question that matters most. Is this aligned with who I am when I am calm? Action waits for that version of you. Reaction is driven by the version of you that is trying to prove something, recover something, or avoid feeling something. Notice how reaction always carries a hidden emotional agenda. Sometimes it is fear of missing out. Sometimes it is anger after a loss. Sometimes it is boredom pretending to be opportunity. Speed becomes the cover story, but underneath it is always the same mechanism. The trader is leaning emotionally into the future, trying to arrive at certainty before it is. The brain of a trader under pressure does not think in probabilities, it thinks in survival. When the market moves sharply, the nervous system does not recognize candles or structure. It recognizes threat and opportunity as the same thing. Something intense that demands a response. This is where the ancient mechanisms take over: fight, flight, or freeze. And most traders never realize that their trading behavior is simply their biology expressing itself through a chart. Fight shows up as revenge trading, overconfidence, forcing trades to dominate the market after being hurt by it. Flight appears as hesitation, missed entries, cutting winners too early just to escape the discomfort of open risk. Freeze hides in plain sight as overanalysis, staring at the screen, waiting for perfect confirmation that never arrives while price moves without you. None of these states are wrong, they are human, but they are incompatible with deliberate action. Action requires access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that evaluates, plans, and chooses, and that part goes offline the moment emotional arousal crosses a certain threshold. This is why telling yourself to stay disciplined in the heat of the moment rarely works. Discipline is not a command, it is a condition, and that condition is a regulated nervous system. Most traders try to think their way out of an emotional state, but emotion is not a thinking problem, it is a physiological one. You cannot out-logic adrenaline. When cortisol is high, the mind narrows, time feels compressed, and the future collapses into the next few seconds. This is why reactive trades feel urgent and obvious, and reflective trades feel slow and uncertain. The body is voting before the mind gets a chance. The market did not trick you into this state. It simply revealed there is a moment in trading that almost no one talks about, not because it is complex, but because it feels empty. And that moment is the pause. The pause is the space between impulse and execution, the fraction of time where nothing happens on the outside, but everything changes on the inside. Most traders avoid this space because it strips away their sense of momentum. In the pause, you can no longer hide behind speed, excitement, or certainty. You are left alone with your thoughts, your doubts, and the raw sensation of not knowing what will happen next. This is why reaction rushes through the pause and action is born inside it. The pause does not feel productive, it feels uncomfortable, and in a performance-driven environment like trading, discomfort is often mistaken for danger. But this is the great inversion most traders never discover. The pause is not where opportunity is lost. It is where clarity is gained. When you slow down even slightly, the nervous system begins to settle, breathing deepens, peripheral awareness returns, and suddenly the chart looks different. Not because price has changed, but because you have. This is where action separates itself from reaction. Action does not emerge from urgency, it emerges from alignment. In the pause, you are no longer trying to force an outcome. You are checking whether the trade fits the plan, the context, and the version of yourself that you trust. Reaction hates this check because it risks being denied. Reaction wants immediate validation, immediate movement, immediate relief. The pause threatens that by introducing choice. And choice is dangerous to the ego because choice implies responsibility. If you act after pausing, you cannot blame speed, volatility, or instinct. You chose. This is why many traders unconsciously skip the pause. It protects them from fully owning their decisions. But ownership is the price of growth. At some point, every serious trader is forced to confront a difficult realization. The market is not the hardest thing to read. Your own emotional signals are. Price is honest. It moves where it moves, but emotion is subtle, layered, and often disguised as logic. This is why most traders believe they are calm right up until the moment they are not. Emotional awareness in trading does not announce itself loudly. It whispers through the body long before it erupts into action. The slight tightening in the stomach when price approaches your level, the shallow breath as a candle accelerates, the mental rehearsal of profit before entry even exists. These are not random sensations. They are early indicators of whether you are about to react or act. The problem is not that these emotions appear. The problem is that traders are trained to ignore them. They focus outward on indicators, timeframes, news, anything except the internal feedback that actually determines decision quality. Learning to recognize emotion in real time is not about becoming soft or hesitant. It is about becoming precise. When you can name what you feel as it happens, excitement, fear, impatience, hope, the emotion loses some of its control. It moves from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. Most reactive trades happen because emotion remains unnamed. It operates in the background, shaping perception without being seen. You think you are seeing a breakout, but you are actually seeing relief. You think you're seeing confirmation, but you are seeing permission to escape doubt. This is why self-observation is so uncomfortable at first. It exposes the gap between the story you tell yourself and the state you are actually in. And that gap is where repeated mistakes live. Awareness does not require you to fix the emotion, only to acknowledge it. The moment you say, internally and honestly, I feel rushed right now, or I am afraid of missing this, something shifts. There comes a point where a trader begins to understand a truth that sounds simple, but cuts against everything the ego wants to believe. Not acting is often the most difficult and the most intelligent decision you can make. In a culture that rewards movement, productivity, and constant engagement, stillness feels like failure. When you're not in a trade, the mind looks for justification. It whispers that you are missing opportunities, falling behind, wasting time. This internal pressure is subtle, but it is relentless, and it pushes traders into the market when nothing is truly aligned. Knowing when not to act is not about fear. It is about respect for context. The market does not offer clean opportunities at all times, and neither does your internal state. Action taken in the wrong emotional climate, even with a perfect setup, is still compromised. This is where many traders sabotage themselves. They wait patiently for a technical signal, but ignore the fact that they are emotionally depleted, distracted, or hungry for validation. They enter anyway because the rules say they should. That is not action. It is delayed reaction. True action requires both external and internal alignment. When either one is missing, restraint becomes the skill. Restraint feels counterintuitive because it provides no immediate feedback. You do not get the dopamine of a win or even the clarity of a loss. You only get silence, and silence is confronting. It forces you to sit with the part of yourself that equates worth with participation. Over time, however, restraint begins to build something deeper than confidence. It builds self-trust. You start to see that you can step away from the screen, let a setup pass, and nothing breaks. Your edge does not disappear. In fact, it sharpens. Each time, maturity in trading does not arrive with a bigger account or a longer streak of wins. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, in the moment you realize you no longer feel the need to react to everything the market does. This is the final shift, and it is not dramatic. There is no sudden confidence, no rush of certainty, no sense of mastery. There is simply less noise inside you. You begin to see price move without immediately attaching your identity to it. A candle can surge and you don't surge with it. A setup can fail and you don't collapse with it. This emotional separation is not detachment, it is stability. It means your sense of self is no longer fused with each outcome. At this stage, action becomes rare, but when it happens, it is clean. You enter because the conditions are met internally and externally, not because you are bored, not because you are chasing, not because you are trying to fix something that feels off inside. Losses still occur, but they land differently. They do not provoke immediate response, they invite reflection. Wins still happen, but they do not inflate you. They pass through without demanding repetition. This is how consistency is actually built, not through control of the market, but through containment of the self. You stop measuring your progress by how often you trade and start measuring it by how often you remain aligned under pressure. The urge to prove fades. The need to be right loosens its grip. What replaces it is something far more durable: respect for process and awareness of state. You understand now that action taken from clarity feels almost boring, and that boredom is not a flaw, it is a signal. It means emotion is no longer hijacking the moment. You also see, with painful honesty, and here is the quiet question that lingers after everything you've just heard, the one most traders are not ready to face yet. If the real battle was never with the market, but with the part of you that rushes, avoids, and reacts, then what happens when the market finally takes that away? Because sooner or later, volatility dries up, opportunities thin out, and the chart stops giving you something to respond to. In that silence, your habits become louder than price ever was. The next video is not about entries or exits or psychology in theory. It is about that silence, about what boredom reveals, about the subtle behaviors that emerge when nothing seems to be happening, and why so many traders self-destruct precisely when the market goes quiet. If you stay, you'll start to see that the moments you thought were empty were actually the ones shaping you the most. Appreciate your time here. These moments are for observing yourself, not the market. A like or subscribe is welcome if you feel it, but don't rush. Keep this awareness with you and let it guide your mind, your emotions, and your decisions.